For me, that was a huge mindset shift. And we had to really look into partnering, collaborating, finding people to work with, and stop trying to have that limiting mindset where it's all the more I do, the better off I am.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying the show, do me a quick little favor and leave us a rating and review. It helps other listeners find the show and get great value out of it, but it also gives us feedback so we can make you work harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Valerie Shirah. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to kasmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to kasmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Valerie Shirah is a wife, mother of 3, and an entrepreneur. She's also the co-founder of the Streamline team and host of Wealth by Choice podcast. Now, when her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 35, she realized that they would not be able to depend solely on his W-2 income. At that time, she was a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling 3 kids, and had no prior experience in real estate or building a business. On their real estate investing journey, she has discovered the power of virtual assistants and is now passionate about helping other investors manage their time and experience massive growth through the use of virtual assistants as well. Let's welcome to the show, Valerie Shirah.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Absolutely. Listen, it's great to talk to you and great to have you on the show. I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. So, like it said, my husband and I would say living the normal American life. He has the job. Yeah, for me, I was a stay-at-home mom. We had 3 kids. Life is what I would say normal. We were kind of going through the Dave Ramsey stuff, trying to build up our emergency fund, and we just had all that. I would say that kind of mindset because that's a whole different mindset. But anyways, we come to find out through some physical problems that my husband was having, mainly a tremor in his arm. We come to find out he actually had Parkinson's disease. And that's kind of our anchor story. That's where we go back to because that was like what changed everything. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that because you come to that point where it's kind of like, am I going to go left or right? And that was that moment for us. We had a choice to make, and we probably would never have made that choice if it wasn't for something pushing us. And the choice being how we're going to provide for our family if our W-2 fails. At the time, he was a heavy equipment operator. And so the use of his hands is crucial. On road construction, operating equipment, you need both arms. And so when he started having a tremor, we knew immediately that his W-2 would not last longer than a few years. So that was kind of the turning point for us. We started looking into other options, eventually got into real estate, and then the whole entrepreneurial starting a business thing. And from then, we've completely changed a lot of our mindset and a lot of our priorities. And so that's kind of like another overview of where we came from and those turning point decisions that have really altered our path. And it's not great that happened, but great things came because of that happening.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, right? You stay at home, mother of 3, homeschooling the kids, husband's out there working, kind of a balanced lifestyle there. And then these tremors, realize that there was something more serious going on, identifying that your husband had Parkinson's disease, and that forced you to really pivot your thinking and come to that fork in the road. You said a couple of things I think are really interesting, and I want to start with that Dave Ramsey model, right? That's a name that's pretty popular. And I know some people look at that. I know a lot of real estate investors shun that approach because they just disagree with the philosophy. But talk to me about what that meant, for you and your husband, following that Dave Ramsey approach, saving money. Like, what did that mean? And what were you focused on at that time?
Yeah. So as far as Dave Ramsey, there's good and there's bad. I feel like there's a lot you can learn from anyone, whether you agree 100% or not. And I feel like Dave Ramsey can be a great place for people to start if they don't know how to manage their money, or if they're struggling with what Robert Kiyosaki would call like doodad debt, debt on things that are not going to make you money. And so having that foundation was very helpful for us because we weren't overspending. We were learning how to, work within our means and still save on top of that. So that part was great. But the part that hurt us was the anti-debt and, all debt is bad kind of mentality. And I feel like we carried that just from, our upbringing. And I feel like the other thing that we struggled with was trying to spend less, constantly focusing on doing without. I mean, I was cutting coupons and spending hours to save 50 cents as a stay-at-home mom. And I look back now and I think it's such a sad, I don't want to say waste of time, but it is. If I would have spent that much effort on increasing my ability to earn from home or to add value in some way, I could have earned way more than 50 cents. And so that was kind of the mentality that we really had to change and come out from and look at how can we add value? How can we increase the skills that we have and then use those skills to go out and build something or buy something, other than just the scarcity mentality. I think it kind of boils down to.
I think that's so helpful for people, right? Because starting out, depending on where you come from, like that's a common belief, especially in smaller markets, where, the cost of living may be a little bit lower, but you don't have as much money. So saving your way to it is kind of what a lot of people think about, right? It's just you got your
Right.
job, you cut coupons, you cut back your costs, you say no to the latte, you do all those things, but it doesn't really help you get ahead, right? It kind of allows you to eliminate maybe debt that you currently have. Your point was by taking that same energy and figuring out how could you make more money? How could you take those same skills and that same effort and generate more income? That would have delivered way better results than, taking a couple of hours to save 50 cents cutting coupons. For just to go back into your backstory a little bit more, because I'm kind of curious now. Where do you think that came from, right? You talked about the mentality and the way you were raised and the way you were brought up. I mean, did you grow up kind of in this scarcity mindset and just felt like, hey, this is how you have to do it? Or just give me more of your background there.
Yeah, so definitely. I grew up in a family of 11 kids. And so
Oh,
it's kind of,
wow.
we fight to survive. And I love big family. Everything was great as far as that goes. But the one thing that I think hurt us in the long run is we were taught in order to get ahead, you work harder. And my dad does construction. So we were kind of in the construction field. And a lot of the stuff that we would do ourselves to save money. Everything was always about saving money, doing it ourselves to be able to get ahead. But in reality, if you do everything yourself, you'll never get ahead because you can't. I mean, at some point you have to draw the line. I mean, you're not going to make your own food and build your own house and still have time to go to work. So at some point we had to realize that you actually get ahead by collaborating, by finding the who in your life. And that's kind of where the VAs come in for me. But on, even maybe real estate side, it'd be finding that partner. You can go way further with a partner than by yourself. And that's something that we did not realize. And we struggled with for years because we always felt like you're going to build a house. Well, let's do the siding ourselves because we'll save money. Let's do the foundation ourselves because we'll save money. When in reality, that's just not true. You may be able to save money, but you can only do one deal. Or, I mean, sorry, you can only build one house a year. So in essence, you didn't save money, your production went way down. And so like for me, that was a huge mindset shift. And we had to really look into partnering, collaborating, finding people to work with, and stop trying to have that limiting mindset where it's all the more I do, the better off I am.
Yeah, I think it's cool because someone listening may hear the Dave Ramsey approach and say, "Oh, we okay. Well, I know that all debt's not bad debt, so I'm good there. Like I don't prescribe to that." But you said a lot more, and you talked about saving, and the way I want to think about it is There's a saver mentality and there's an investor mentality. You can use the word investor broadly, but it's really about making money or earning money. And there are people who invest in real estate, meaning they go out and buy a property, but then they want to do all the work themselves because that's how they're going to
Mhm.
save, right? They're going to
Right.
save by being the general contractor. They're going to turn it themselves. They're going to be the property manager. They're going to lease it themselves. So they're looking at how can they save and keep more money for themselves. The
Mhm.
true investor, though, they're focused on how much they can earn and how much they can scale. So they're not going to look at it in the same lens because they're going to say, hey, I'm going to need a contractor to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to get a leasing agent. I'm going to get a realtor. I'm going to get a property management company. And I'm going to spend the same amount of time and energy focused on ways to scale or to earn more or to do the things that I actually want to do and not just focused on the savings. And there are a lot of investors that still don't understand that component of it. If you have a great W-2 job, it doesn't mean you now need to get a part-time job and work an extra 8 hours a day doing real estate. There are ways to invest, and we call it passive investing, but you can invest passively where you have a team, you have other people who are doing the work. And then if you
Mhm.
have those hours freed up, you can find other ways to invest and make money back. But when you invest, that's about a return on your money, not necessarily a return on your time. And most people don't look at it based on the time. I mean, you talk about cutting coupons for hours or trying to replace the siding yourself or painting yourself. Well, sure, if you do that and you tell people, oh, I made a 20% return on my investment, you're not giving yourself credit for the amount of hours you put in. And if you really bake in the hours of what you quote unquote saved, you really maybe lost money by doing a deal or you're doing it that way, right? So I think it's really important for people to recognize that there is a difference between, your time investment and your money investment, but also that saver mentality and approaching it by trying to keep every dollar you can as opposed to investing it so you can get the real return on your money.
Sure, sure. And if I could throw one more thing in there that, just hearing you talk about that makes me think a lot of times we hear get into real estate and everybody thinks, okay, well, that means I have to go buy the house. That means I have to go do this, go do that. That may not be their skill set. You may not be good at it and you may not even like it. And we kind of were into that in the beginning. I mean, we bought a fourplex. That was our first property. Then we were buying duplexes. And what I didn't realize is not so much that you do real estate. It's that you find out how you can add value and what you're passionate about. If you're really good at, say if you're in tech, don't get out of tech. Just if you love it and you're good at it, be that high income earner and just put your money into it because you're way more valuable in tech than you'll ever be in real estate if that's not what interests you, if that's not what your unfair advantage is in. And so a lot of times I think people hear advice and it sounds cookie cutter, but it's really not. I personally feel like it really boils down to what are you good at and what do you enjoy doing? If you can scale that, whatever that may be, whether it's in real estate or out of real estate, if you can scale that, you'll be great because you can take either money or time and invest that in real estate and it's worth it in the long run. But if you can stay in that position where you have the advantage to scale, that's where you'll do best.
Valerie, I love that. And that kind of leads me to the second thing you said earlier, which was how do you provide for your family if your W-2 fails? If you lose your job, how do you take care of your family? And I think that's a real challenge people at least need to think about. At this current time, we know that there are different employers who are making layoffs across the country. And, I was at a company that, had went through layoffs. And that was kind of what my origin story was, right? Is like being at a company going through bankruptcy and trying to figure out what your options are. You realize that, man, this could happen at any company pretty much at any time. So this safe, secure job isn't really that safe or that secure. So you need to have a plan B. And obviously you have skills that are transferable and you can go get a new job, but
Mhm.
you don't want to only bank on kind of this game of updating that resume and going to interview. You need to have something that you can control. And for a lot of people, real estate becomes, that outlet or that vehicle. And it sounds like real estate became that vehicle for you all. Talk to me about kind of that process, right? You go through this situation with your husband, you realize we need to figure something else out because you only may have a couple of years being in your current job. How did you land on real estate and what were those first investments like?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing I want to throw out there is it is always better to start small in the beginning when you don't have to. Looking back, if my husband and I would have focused on that in the beginning when we were doing like the Dave Ramsey stuff, if we would have focused on that, we would have already been ahead when we found out W-2 is not going to work. So hindsight's always 2020. But as far as like what you're saying, if somebody can start building those skills or building that portfolio early, they can kind of find out and be prepared for that when that time comes. So anyways, we were not prepared. Going back to it, what I started doing, I think somebody got us onto Bigger Pockets. So I started listening to Brandon Turner and all the Bigger Pocket stuff. And at the time I started calling property managers in the area, started talking to people. And the one thing that I think is funny that one of the property managers said is, whatever you do, do not get into multifamily. It's a nightmare. You want to go single family. You know, if you get multifamily, tenants are fighting. It's a nightmare. You won't want to. And so I was like, okay, we don't want multifamily. When I went to a RIA meeting and another a guy, he's like, whatever you do, don't get in multifamily. The boiler systems are a fortune if you have to replace them and whatever. So two people right in the beginning kind of said that. We were like, okay, we don't want multifamily. So we started looking at single family. And I'll be honest, after a little while, it was like, okay, these numbers really suck. I mean, it's going to take a lot of single family houses to replace his income. And if we look at the amount of money we have to put into each home and the loans, it just didn't seem feasible. We were like, this isn't going to work in the time frame we need it to work in. Yeah. And so then we started looking at like short-term rentals. And then we started meeting some people who were into multifamily, and they're like, don't pay attention to that. They either had a bad experience or they don't know what they're talking about. And so what we did was we started small multi with compared to like the midterm rentals, like traveling nurse, medical student. Mm-hmm. We felt like that was that sweet spot where we could kind of go multifamily, but it wasn't so big that we'd have boiler systems. And we were trying to maximize the cash flow through the midterm rentals. Where we live, short-term rentals, it's not really a vacation market. Up in Ohio, it was a little bit, so we were afraid to do like true short-term rentals at the time. So found that sweet spot, and it works really well. We ended up acquiring a couple more duplexes and doing that. But in doing all that, I started to get really overwhelmed. You know, Jonathan, my husband's still working full-time, and in the summer, sun up to sundown. He's not out there on the roads. In Ohio, we have nasty winters, so they really prioritize summer. And I'm trying to deal with tenants, deal with issues that they're having, message guests, and all that fun stuff. And I remember one night I said, Jonathan, I don't think I can keep doing this. It is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm so stressed out. Our kids were starting to homeschool, so I'm homeschooling our kids at home. And thankfully, we didn't have the choice to give up. I feel like this is the point that a lot of people hit that wall and then back down. But because of Parkinson's and because we didn't really have a plan B, we had to figure out how to break that glass ceiling. And I think that a lot of people need to do that. They need to find that why that's strong enough to push them past the point of turnaround. And everybody will hit a wall. It's inevitable. In anything that you do, you'll hit a wall. And if your why isn't strong enough, you'll just bounce back down. And so for us, when I hit that point, we just started looking, okay, how do we move on? How have other people moved past this part of doing everything yourself, becoming so overwhelmed? And that's kind of where the virtual assistants come into. And that's where we started hiring virtual assistants, and we're able to break past that wall and kind of scale beyond that.
I love that. You said, thankfully, we were in a position where we couldn't turn around and we couldn't stop. And I think that is very, profound, because there's a gratitude you can have when your why is big enough that that's the option. There's a book, The Obstacles Away, right? And a lot of this is really important, because for so many people, if it's just about making a little extra money, that may not be a big enough reason to go through kind of the headaches and frustrations that you face. And every successful investor I know, they've faced some issues and some challenges, and they've had to figure out ways to overcome them. And for you all, you knew that, what, there is no plan B. Like, this is it. We only have a certain amount of time. We have to figure out how to make this work. So let's explore other options. The second part that I think is so critical is you took the time to figure out what exactly was the issue. It wasn't that real estate doesn't work. It wasn't that midterm rentals don't work. It wasn't that multifamily doesn't work. It was simply stating, what, this isn't working for us, and here's the challenges I'm facing. How do we address these specific challenges. Walk
Right.
me through that process. I mean, did you sit there and make a list and say, okay, hey, I'm struggling with this, this, and this. Let's hire VAs? Or how did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I think the biggest thing to do when you hit that moment or when you run into something like that is look around. Who is doing it? Who's already making it? Because if you yeah, I mean, you could take a long time trying to figure everything out yourself. And if there's somebody who's already been there, just go to them and ask. Most people are more than happy, if not thrilled, to help you. And so that's kind of what we did. We started asking, like, what is everybody doing? There's no way you all are doing what we're doing with 1,000 units, you know? And so we just started talking to other people. And then we kept hearing a VA, virtual assistant. And so that's when we were like, okay, that makes sense. You know, getting somebody to be able to take some of these tasks off our plate would allow us to be able to focus on growth and moving beyond, just the beginning, the start of where we were at. And like I said, we were kind of getting into real estate, but we were also wanting to build some type of business just for higher cash flow to put into real estate. And we couldn't do that. If it was just him and I, we had kind of maxed out. And so that's where we decided to give it a try. And we did. We hired a virtual assistant, and she was able to take a ton of stuff off my plate and allow me to focus specifically on what are we doing from here? What are we going to do to grow? What do we need to acquire? And we ended up joining some masterminds. And I guess all of it kind of boils down to talking to others who are where you want to be, because they can tell you the way so much faster than you could ever figure it out on your own.
I love it. Valerie, great insight right there. And it seems almost obvious that the next step is just to ask who else is doing it and reach out
Right.
to those people and say, hey, here's the challenge I'm facing. What are y'all doing? And I would say too, like that's one thing that's I always find amazing with real estate investors, particularly outside of, and I mean true investors like short-term rental, midterm rental, multifamily, that you don't see in the residential space as much, but they're so helpful. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
100%.
people really are willing to share information. There's free information. There's podcasts like this one. There's, bigger pockets, as you mentioned. There are books out there. So you can find the answer to a lot of things if you take the time to ask the questions and look and see what's out there. And then obviously, if you need some more help, their mastermind, their coaching programs are things that can help you really, get to the next level. But you don't see that in residential as much. And I actually had a coaching call with one of my clients earlier today, and he's an agent, so he was just talking about like he was really surprised and overwhelmed that so many people are reaching out and want to talk to him and engaging with him. And he's like, hey, like, I'm friendly to other agents, but we're in competition. We're not that friendly, right? We're not sharing secrets and insights. And it feels like people are way more welcoming in
Right.
this space. And I'm like, they are. I'm like, this is all about partnerships and it's about
Mm-hmm.
teamwork. And most of us recognize that. And it's not really competitive in the sense of, if I tell you to use a VA, now you're going to steal deals from me and my kids won't eat, right? It's not that
Right.
competitive. And it goes back to the scarcity mindset versus that abundance mindset. If you are still in that mindset of, you know what, hey, like we only have so much, there's only so much real estate, there's only so many deals in my market, I can't tell other people what I'm doing because what if they go out there and get that great deal? That's a
Right.
completely different mindset. And I think for a lot of investors, when you have that abundant mindset, you know that there's a new deal around the corner. So I'm not as worried about this opportunity or sharing something with you. And the reality is, people, either you're motivated enough to go out there and take that information and use it, or like some people, a lot of people, quite frankly, they just do nothing with it. Right. So me sharing something with you doesn't hurt me at all. And I just think that mentality, it's so important to understand that there are people who are willing to collaborate and help you get success. So it's a huge insight, but it's also a pretty direct and simple one. Figure out who's doing what you're looking for and talk to them, and then take those insights and apply them. Let's talk a little bit more about where you're at today, Valerie. So you've got, the Streamline team, you've got your real estate portfolio. Talk to us about the portfolio right now. Where do you kind of sit today? And then talk to me more specifically about the Streamline team.
Yeah, sure. So as far as like the real estate, we got some of the properties. We ended up selling some of the duplexes and stuff because we're actually right now in the process of moving to North Carolina from Ohio. And so we sold some of that and we invested passively. And that goes down to one of the things we're finding your strength. For me, I love long story short, we ended up doing the virtual assistants. Absolutely loved that. Created the company, and I loved that more than I loved working in the real estate. And so that's that point where it boils down to finding your strength. And so for us, our strength was, for me, working with the VAs and helping other investors grow, and then just putting money into real estate. And that's also what we're looking at doing here in North Carolina. We're looking at acquiring home service businesses, whether that's HVAC, electrical, because we have that construction background. And I love that business side of it. So we're investing in multifamily, but at this point in our game, it's through money, because we love the business side more than inside dealing with the tenants and all of that on the multifamily side. So it, like I said, really boils down to finding your strengths. But as far as the VA business, what ended up happening in the beginning, it was, I really struggled finding a good VA. It was hard. I'd put an ad out there and I'd have hundreds of responses. I had to weed through all of them, try them out, so to speak, and try and find someone that worked. But I think the other thing that I really struggled with was finding, what do I give them to do? I'm busy, but it's not easy just to hand over the correct task and train them and all of that. So I really struggled with that. It took probably 4 months before I felt like it was worth it, because I just wasn't doing a great job. And so in the end, we find out, better ways of outsourcing, better ways of handing over tasks, better ways of finding out what you need to do. We end up loving it. And for example, I hired one of our first VAs to help do guest messaging, specifically like through our Airbnb properties. And she did that. And that was great. And I felt a lot of relief through that. But then it was like, okay, what else do I do? And I was having her do just odd tasks, odd jobs. And I just didn't feel like it was real productive or real helpful. And it was almost like more frustrating than just doing them myself, because there are a bunch of odd things. So what I ended up doing, and this is what I highly recommend people doing, is I sat down and I started documenting, what am I doing every day? And you can do this every 15 minutes. You can do this every half hour or every hour, but really document, what am I doing every day? And you do that for a few days, you will start to see a pattern. And you'll start to see a pattern of what you need help with. What is taking the most of your time? Some of it's going to be stuff that you need to hand off. Others you just need to quit. For me, if I'm on Facebook, it's just wasted time. So it was kind of eye-opening on both sides. But through that, I've seen that I was actually spending hours grading homework because I was homeschooling. And most people would not look at that, because that's not in the business. I'm trying to scale the business. But what I like to tell people is, look at your time as a holistic picture. What are you doing all day? Because if you take off, for me, grading schoolwork, it frees me up to put more time into the business. And it was a bigger chunk than any of the smaller tasks I was trying to hand her that were in the business. So I ended up scanning my answer keys, putting them on the Google Drive, getting a camera. My kids would slide their book under the camera. She would grade it with them. And then she would let me know what areas they needed help in. That was huge for me as a stay-at-home mom homeschooling. So for every person, it will be different. But what I really recommend is looking at your time from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, and thinking, what is taking the most time? What is something that I don't like doing that I really want to get off my plate? And don't focus just on that business element, because you may be surprised at maybe something that you need to get off of your plate.
I really appreciate you sharing that. The biggest thing for you was not anything in the business itself, but actually grading papers and having that VA take over. And your advice for people to look at their life holistically, document how they're spending their time, and then figure out, hey, what are the tasks that I can pass along, especially tasks that don't have a major impact on the business in sales or revenue, but just things that have to get done, right? If you can figure that out, and then even if it's stuff in your personal life, figure out what those tasks are. That way you free yourself up for the more important opportunities. Just really great insights. You started talking about some of the challenges you face. I know I kind of went through a couple of VAs and learned, similar to you, it sounds like, that I was really bad at providing tasks at first, and learned how to get better at that. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see real estate investors make when hiring virtual assistants?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake, number one, is lack of feedback. And I was huge with that. I would ask her to do something. She'd come back and I'd be like, that is not what I asked her to do. Forget about it. Let's just move on. And I would just keep doing that. Well, first off, she didn't even know she didn't do it good. And then second off, if she knew that it wasn't what I was looking for, she didn't know what she did wrong. And so that one thing can make or break your time and your relationship with the virtual assistant. But if you think about it, if you go to work, in person somewhere, there's going to be training, there's going to be feedback, there's going to be evaluations. And for some reason, there's this little mindset that with a VA, it's almost like, I don't want to say machine, but it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just give it to them, they get it done. Give it to them, they get it done. But, some of these things we're looking at is like social media. If I'm going to have her creating posts or reels for me, and she sent it to me, if I don't like something, I have to say exactly why. Say, hey, you did a great job, but I don't really care for this, X, Y, and Z. Let me show you an account that I love and that I want to model after. And then let me know if you can, redo it, and we'll talk about it then. So I'll send them, maybe I'm trying to be like Grant Cardone. I might send her Grant Cardone's account and say, do you see how he uses red and everything? I love that. That's the kind of feedback that can really help the VA get to know your business intimately so that they can really dial in their work and dial in their efforts so they can be way more productive in everything they do. And it takes time, but they are so much more effective, as that relationship builds month after month, and they get better and better until they think like you, because you've given them that feedback that is so valuable to them.
That's really great insight there. Because you're spot on. That's exactly how I saw when I first started. It was, here's this task, throw it over the fence. Great. It came back. Hey, this is not what I was expecting. And you really forget that these are, for lack of a better word, employees. And
Mm-hmm.
you would never hire an employee without training them or giving them context of what their role is. On the flip side of that, whenever you hire an employee, you're hiring them for a specific role. You
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't hire someone who is supposed to do with marketing, and I'll just use marketing broadly at this point, but then also give them finance tasks and expect them to do some
Right.
operational stuff and expect them to do some HR stuff. It's like, wait a minute. You saw that I have a marketing background. You're asking me to do all this non-marketing stuff, right? Because we see assistant is like, oh, here's all the crap I need done. Can you
Right,
handle
right.
these 10 things? Can you write copy? Can you do graphics? Can you do my emails? Can you do? It's like, no, they probably are not very good at doing 10 different things. Like, and I used to be at a marketing agency, and it's like there were people who only wrote copy,
Right.
right? Period. And they could usually only do copy for like TV, radio, or print. You try to get them social media. Whoa, that's whole different type of copywriting than radio, right? Like I got 30 seconds to tell a story versus a social media versus email. Like these are professional copywriters who really didn't know how to write copy for emails. Yet we
Mm-hmm.
expect the virtual assistant to be able to do all marketing. And
Yeah.
and I think part of it for me, I had to step back and realize like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you're not thinking about this logically and understanding what their skill set is, because you would never do this in any other profession. You wouldn't hire somebody and tell them to run all of your an entire department where there are specified roles in each one. So I think that's a challenge a lot of people face, as well as trying to figure out what can they do and how to get started. For someone who is looking to bring on that VA, I'm trying not to scare them off of this, but for someone who is trying to bring in the VA, I'm talking about the Streamline team, and how do you help them kind of identify, the VAs who are right for them, and maybe some of the challenges that they can overcome in the business.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing we do is kind of like what you just said. We'll sit down and talk and see what are their goals? What is the biggest pain point that they have? Is it in marketing? Is it in admin tasks, bookkeeping, social media? Do they need somebody to help underwrite, do preliminary underwriting? We get a feel for all their different needs, and then we kind of say, if you could only get one thing off, what's the most important thing? And if they say it's uh, sourcing leads, or if it's market research, they're wanting to get to know a different market, we'll prioritize that. We'll try to find somebody who has those skills, who can take that off their plate. And then we'll look at what's next, because sometimes things don't take, if you're wanting a full-time VA, it may not take 40 hours a week. So if that's off your plate, we'll try to see what they match up with, that they can take other things off, but they may not be the best at. So for example, my first VA, she was I treated her like a jack of all trades, and she did well. She really learned a lot of different things. And you can do that to some degree. You can have somebody who's just like a personal assistant and they really get to know different areas, but you can't expect them to be a specialist in each of those areas. And that's where it really breaks down. And so we'll kind of get to know the client and see what their needs are. Are they needing somebody who can take a lot of different things and juggle at them and just take that pressure off the client? Or do they need a specialist in a specific area? And then a lot of times, once they grow, that's when you start looking for somebody to take those jobs off that assistant one by one, starting with marketing, then maybe it's copywriting, then maybe it's working in sales, or, if it's real estate, maybe it's data entry, bookkeeping, all that stuff. So that's the first thing that we do, is really get to know the needs the person has. And then after that, we find a virtual assistant who has those skills, and we work with them after that. It just makes the process a lot easier, especially if somebody has either never done it or has done it and has not been successful.
To recap what we talked about, it's like it goes back to that mentality, right? That savings mentality, that scarcity mentality. Yes, you can try to do all this by yourself, but you're not really investing that time in growing, maybe to the extent of what you could, versus figuring out where you need help, figuring out where you can bring on support, and hiring a VA or hiring other people who can take on some of these tasks. So you can focus on the things that are really important to grow the business, to grow your revenue, and ultimately help you see the success and the goals that you have for yourself. So think about it that way. It's an investment. It's not necessarily about saving more money, but it's about how do you actually grow so you can hit those goals and those objectives. If you want to learn more, check out Valerie and her team at thestreamlineteam.com. We'll make sure we put a link to that in our show notes. Right now, we're going to go to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, Valerie, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
I think that would be kind of what I talked about earlier, where that do-it-yourself mentality. I did a lot of things myself, and I did not try to collaborate or take on partners. And so by failing, I would say time after time, I really ingrained it in me. The value of partnerships and the value of working with other people. And I feel like once I learned the lesson, long term, it's so beneficial because I can really see the value of it.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Digital or mobile resource. Everybody probably has this, but to me, it's Audible. I listen to so many books while I'm driving, while I'm doing stuff at home, folding laundry, washing dishes, anytime. I don't know if that counts. That's what I would say, because it allows me to be an avid reader by listening.
There you go. No, Audible definitely counts. Appreciate you sharing that one. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
That would be Who Not How. That's one of our favorite books. I feel like that, instrumental for us in that mindset shift, and I highly recommend it.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
It would be my morning routine. I'm an early person. Definitely, I've always been an early morning person. So usually 4:35 a.m., I'm up, getting my coffee. I have just that time that I can focus my mind. I read over my goals. I really look at kind of the week, reevaluate where I'm standing, what I need to do for the day. And I feel like it kind of gears me up and gets me ready to hit it hard when we start work.
All right, give me your number one insight for using virtual assistants.
The number one insight, and I guess that would be taking what you can do yourself and multiplying it by, or adding another person. It doesn't mean 1 + 1 is 2. A lot of times you think if I add one person, I double what I get done. Well, that's not necessarily true. Usually it's more like 1 + 1 = 3 or more. So that would probably be one of my biggest insights, is looking at the productivity multiplier of adding 1, 2 people to your team is just mind blowing.
All right. And I know you are from Warren, but, moving to North Carolina. So let's stick with Warren. I know you're still getting settled there in North Carolina. But give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Yeah, I'm a Starbucks fan. That's probably not something to bite to eat. I'm coffee. Bite to eat in Warren. Um, I'm just an old Chipotle person. We don't eat out a whole lot. So I just always go by Chipotle and grab something.
I was gonna say, typically when you go from cutting coupons to save 50 cents
I
and
know.
you
I'm
got
not.
three kids, going out for big steakhouse dinners isn't
I
really a
haven't crossed that mindset break yet.
yeah. Understand completely. Well, listen, Valerie, I love talking to you. Great information, and I appreciate you sharing kind of, a lot of that mindset shift and kind of how you were jolted out of this path that so many people are on, right? I mean, listen, it's great to be a saver and to think about your finances, but recognizing that, hey, this path of trying to save our way to freedom and to flexibility is just too long, and it may not give us the growth we're looking for. But instead, if we can invest and find ways to earn more money, that's going to help us get there. And I think that's a big shift for a lot of people. The second thing you said, though, was you don't have to be the expert and you don't have to do it all by yourself. So figuring out who can take on these things and who can help you see that success is really key, whether it's investing in real estate and being more passive, whether it's hiring VAs or just hiring other professionals who can come in and help you in the business. So those are kind of my key takeaways. And if anybody is interested in learning more about working with virtual assistants or learning more about you and your company, again, they can go to the streamlineteam.com, and that is in our show notes below. Valerie, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much, John. It's been a pleasure.